Hello out there in internet land, and welcome to part 2 of this week's One Deck Dungeon dev stream. I am John, the lead developer, and also known as Migrant P. So welcome, and hope you enjoy this. Jennifer had a great stream there working on the help and the options. You know, there's always lots of things that need to get done in game development that you don't necessarily think about. And they're just as important as everything else. So when you're, looking to, bring the game to a new platform, there's a lot of little details that need to get done. And we're happy to share some of those with you. Also, feel free to say hello in the chat if you're watching and ask any questions, and we'll get to work. All right. So yeah, not all game development is exciting explosions and things like that. There are lots of screens to update and things that need to get done. But that's all part of the fun. So here we see that Jennifer's changes have been pushed up, and I pulled those down here. Just double check that. So I'll be able to do some integration on that option screen and get that working nicely. So let's go and have a look at it in Unity. And I'm going to switch my layout. It's a little better for streaming with this swapping size. All right, so let's go and look at the options portrait, make sure it has what Jennifer did. Looks like it. So of course we don't have the tabs working yet, but we've got the rest is showing up, so that is what we want. And let's get this scene view looking where we want. So all right. So here in the what we want to do basically here is get these tabs hooked up so they switch between the different panels. So we display the right one based on what one is toggled. And we can delete, we don't need this resolution one, so we can delete that. Make sure this options view controller doesn't give a null reference or something like that. We can make sure that happens. And so yeah, let's hook up some tabs. So one way to sort of do a tab controller is you could have some code that, like, you click this button and it calls a method and turns things on and off. That is certainly a valid way to do it. I did find a cool little method on this Mateodon blog that showed an interesting way to do it just using the Unity UI controls and not any scripting at all. So that's something I'm going to try here, and we'll see how it works. So basically, this is just going to use basically like a radio button kind of concept, but it doesn't have to look like that, of course. I implemented it here in a test scene that looks very nice, and I'll show it running, and then I'll show you how it's put together. So yeah, we can click on these tabs, and you can see here in the hierarchy, these different panels are being turned on and off. You might notice that there's no animation of the panel; it's just like instantly on and off, which is fine for what we're doing here with tabs. But if you want to do more than that, we probably want to do some more code integration and stuff like that. But the basic idea is we've got this panel is just containing everything. There's a toggle group on this tab bar container, and it has a layout group for the tabs, and each tab button here is a toggle, which is like just a checkbox. See, this is actually like using the checkbox because I just threw in the default one. Just using a checkbox, and when the checkbox gets changed, it just calls set active on the right one. So whenever these toggles because it's a toggle group, when I click one of them, it turns the other ones off, and so that's turning the other game objects off. So this just sort of all works together with this setup, and there's no scripting needed at all. So that's pretty cool. So let's set up that idea in here. So let's zoom this out a little bit. There we go. So let's see. So down on our tab panel, we'll add the toggle group onto that as well. And we already have a grid layout, which is fine, I think. I think I'm just going to change this so that these are in the center, maybe upper center, in case, you know, then if there's any adjustments on the side, they'll stay in the middle. And I did want to make these tab buttons a prefab, so if we decide to change how they look, we don't have to do it once. So let's do that under, and it's probably, we'll just make a prefab here. So let's just call it tab button. And we'll make a prefab just by drag and drop. And then, yeah, so these are, I'm actually going to change this so it's not a button, but it's a toggle. So that's going to be a little different, but I'll preserve the same things that Jennifer has in terms of the style. All right, so we'll add a toggle component. And we're not using color tint. Actually, yeah, so with the toggle, you need to have a sort of an active background and an inactive background. And so, like, if I add a new toggle, you can see how it's set up. A typical toggle control has, actually doesn't even have a graphic of its own. And then it has, yeah, maybe I'll just base it off of this, and then we'll do that. So let me, let's just get rid of this prefab, and I'll make a new prefab. You know, we'll call this tab button. And then we'll just have it set up the same. So this label, we don't want that. We want actually a Text Mesh Pro label. We want, yeah, so maybe I'll just hide these other ones so this one's going to show up. So we're just going to rebuild this using a toggle for this. So the background image for this is, if we look at it, zoom right in on it, is just this square. So we actually want this to be like the full size. And we're going to use the wood background for that. So where's that image? Wooden tab. Okay. We'll use that for the background. That's looking right. Looks like it's getting stretched out a bit. We probably don't want that. So we'll adjust it. We'll adjust the aspect of that grid so that we don't stretch out the buttons. And then the check mark is what's used when we're actually got the tab selected. So we're going to want one of those brighter images to indicate that the tab's been selected. And so, yeah, I think we just want this highlighted. We just have the highlighted one. So, so let's put that in here. So when it's checked, when it's the active tab, it's bright, and when it's the inactive tab, it's dark. So that is good, and this is set up to, you know, when it's toggled, it automatically toggles this. So we can run this and see sort of how it works. So this is just got a toggle, so it's just like a checkbox, right? Working right now. And yeah, we're getting null references off of the options view controller because this does not have a do not expect that these would ever be null, so we can put a null check in there. Jennifer can make an adjustment to the tab shape. That's true. And this also needs to check the full screen toggle. Cool. And this start code doesn't need to actually run unless we have the resolution controls, so let's just update that. All right, so yeah, so we're gonna just grab this label and we'll throw it in here. this is going to be the prefabs. This will be like just the generic text. And we'll fit it inside. And we can probably adjust like the position of it and stuff, but probably want it to be a little like towards the top. So we want like more off the bottom. Yeah, like we want it to be sort of visually look like it's in there, right? I'm not sure how Jennifer had it set up before. Yeah, like, okay, 0 from the, yeah. I think that looks a little more visually centered. So we'll try this and see how it looks. So then we also can highlight the background sort of based on your, let me turn off this navigation here. Let's use these highlight colors as well. So this is like separate from the active tab. Come on. This is the sort of mouse over thing, which you don't really have on as much. Like you have mouse over sort of on mobile when your finger's on it, and then your finger's on it so you can't see it, but you know, it's kind of like that. All right, so let's, let's get this, excuse me, prefab made again. Okay, so let's drag this into here. Oops, wrong spot. Come on. Okay, so now we have a prefab, and we can, we'll keep this sort of default prefab as it is, but then we can make an audio tab and just update the label, and display tab. This is all, you know, based on what Jennifer did, just like resetting it to be a toggle is what we're looking for the integration. And this is display, and the last one, gameplay tab, is gameplay. Cool, and that font might still be a little too big, I think. But so yeah, so let's, we can just get rid of all of these because we have the prefab now. We can just edit the prefab directly anytime. And let's see how this looks. So yeah, so those are still getting stretched out a little bit. I think we're gonna want to reduce that font size a little bit. And here now I can just go to the prefab and say I want this font size to be 30 and apply, and it updates all of them. That looks a little better, I think. And I also think we don't want to stretch that graphic, so I'm gonna update this to be a little narrower. Yeah, then we end up yeah, maybe we'll just leave it as it is right now, and maybe we can adjust the image to fit that shape a little better. That might be the better way to go. Okay, so let's save this change and save the project just to make sure that's all set. So let's see how these tabs are looking now. All right, so yeah, so they aren't working together, right? Because they're independent checkboxes basically, but you can see we can like click them on and off. So let's connect them to that tab group, the toggle group. So all we have to do is select all these and make them connect to that toggle group. And then we'll hook them up to the container. So the audio container is first, so we'll turn it on by default. And what we want to do is whenever this tab is changed, we're going to tell the auto container game object to set active, and that's going to be true or false based on what the value is. Same thing for display tab. Connect to the display container and set active. And then the gameplay tab goes to the gameplay container. Set active. Cool. All right, so let's see if this does what we expect. And we can sort of make this, we start this one being off and this one being off, but the toggle group should handle that for us, but we'll just set that just to be sure. All right, so we see these ones are grayed out, and we can click on it to switch the tab that we're on. That is looking pretty good. We get a little bit of the highlight on the mouse over there as well. Not a huge amount, but it's a little subtle thing that you can tap on something. We could add a little more, like having the color of the text change or something maybe, but we'll, we can always adjust stuff on that. And cool, so, and then our sliders do stuff. I guess I don't want the music on during the stream, but I have other music playing. Cool. All right. So so that is looking good. One thing I wanted to adjust a little bit, I think, is in the in this gameplay section. So in here we just have music and effects. Here we have display settings. Here we actually have two sort of sections. There's the usage confirmations and there's the gameplay hints, and it's not really clear here that those are separate. And so I'm going to add a separator in between those. So let's open up the gameplay container here. One of the sort of downsides of this, I think the downside of this method is you have to remember to save the scene in the right state at the end. Unless, yeah. So if you don't remember to save the scene properly with the right game object being enabled, then you end up with a mismatch. So if you had a tab controller code script that was in charge, it would know to reset things at the start of the scene. And I don't think that is something that's a downside of doing it this way. It's a little, obviously you don't need to write any code, but you don't get control over that. Or, other things like, maybe you want other things to happen when you change tabs. You don't get that kind of flexibility. But for now, I think it'll be okay for what we want to do here. So yeah, I'm going to take this label here. Do we have it's a grid layout group. We probably want to use actually a vertical layout group here because not everything is going to be the same size. There's like this label doesn't need to be the same size as everything inside, unless the label is like ignoring layout. Yeah, okay. So yeah, probably we just want this all to be vertical layout group instead of a grid, and then that will line things up where they don't need to all be the same size. So I'm going to remove this and add a vertical layout group. And at first things go a little funny. That's okay. We want to put things in the middle and probably just straight up centered. We can change this to not ignore the layout. It'll be sort of its natural layout. We can turn off auto sizing on the font. Yeah, so there's an option here to control the size of the children. I don't know if we want that. These have layout. Yeah, so right now these objects are controlling like how big they are, and I think that's okay. This doesn't need to be 100, right? It's only like 30 high. You can have it sort of naturally expand to its size, but I think we don't necessarily need to do that. So here we want to put some padding at the top for stuff, like 50, that looks good. And then these don't necessarily need to be 80 high or 100 high. I think 80 high is more like what they really are in terms of layout. And then we can add another header label in here. And we can say gameplay hints. You can see where our layout is just sort of happening for us, right? So that's one nice thing about the layout group, the vertical layout group control. So yeah, so now let's see. So we've got those sort of two sections. Sometimes you can twig the thing to, so we could, add some more spacing. We could reduce spacing if we wanted to, but I think that is looking pretty okay at this point. And then if we add new things, it'll tighten them up. So if I sort of add more, you can see I just added another one at the end. It just tightened them up together automatically. So that's something that I think works here. All right, and so we have to make sure to keep the audio tab open first, which is definitely annoying, and I don't know if that's a big downside to doing that method. It's very easy to accidentally save the scene with the tab set wrong, and then it's going to be screwed up, right? That's something our options view controller could potentially just set the right tab to begin with, but it's not necessarily necessary. I also think we're probably going to standardize a navigation bar on all the screens that have that. So right now, the way this is at the top isn't going to be final, but that's the way it is at the moment, and that's okay. We'll probably, if you look at Sentinels or Bottom of the Ninth, we have a standard sort of control that we use at the top with title and everything, and we'll probably want to do something like that. But that will be for another time. So let's go and make sure this option screen is actually working. So on the main menu, we can run it. It's like that little dot in the corner. All right, so here is our phone main menu. I can click options, and it is just showing the landscape options screen, so that is not what we want. I bet there's some integration. It's probably loading that scene without adding the portrait, loading the right portrait scene. So let's look and see what is this options button doing. It's probably calling, present modal view controller on click. And it's saying to load the option screen, but I bet that script is not appending the thing properly. So let's have a look. So we're calling this menu controller, which is a class we use to handle transition in between different screens really easily. So we using this present modal view controller, which is sort of inspired by iOS view controllers, where it can basically show a pop-up with a scene. And here we need to present this. Basically, at the last second, I want to basically have it update the scene name. So the scene is actually going to be needs to have the right name. So you can see that we're just using scene name, and that's right now just options. What we need to do is get, I think, actual scene name, actual level name. And so what that method does is it just, if it's got the option to use portrait scenes and we're in portrait, we need to add that suffix dash portrait to load the right scene. Otherwise, it just returns back the same thing. So that's what's going on here. We've updated that logic to make sure that logic was working in the other places, but I guess it wasn't on that present modal. So let's try it out. All right, now we're loading our correct scene. You can see there's a little, it looks a little funny down there. I'm not sure if there's probably an image in there that's not, we never noticed it when the scene was by itself. The tab panel is using this background image, so we'll fix that so it doesn't show like that. But I think looking like this looks pretty good. We can switch between our tabs. We can increase the effects volume, make the fire crackle louder or less, make the music be playing double or not. And so all these things are looking good. Reset the hints, That's all good. Okay. And then we also want to make sure that is going to be showing properly in game, which is another place that you can open the options. And click it here, and yep, looks like it loaded fine there. And you can see it's actually loading in the scene additionally, and then when I close it, it unloads the scene. So that's a nice way to have that set up. Okay, so what I want to do is just finally get back there and remove that image. That was that sort of white thing. I don't need to remove it, just like hide it basically. So our tab panel is here, and we just want this to be 0. It's usually nice to sort of leave the image object there because you might want to put something else or be able to have it clicked on or things like that. All right, so let's just go back to main menu and double check that that looks the way we like. Cool, and looks nice at the bottom there. All right, so I think that is pretty good. So I'm going to make sure we're all saved. I didn't actually change the main menu scene, just the code, some code, I think, in another place. So I just changed this menu controller to get the actual level name properly. We did add some null checks into that code, and basically, but all the actual handling within the options scene was using the Unity UI stuff. So code integration for options screen tabs. All right, so that is done. Let's have a look on our Trello board, because I think that's basically going to be it. We did those tabs, did this, did this, did this. I'm going to add an item to fix tab button images so they are not stretched. And I'm going to add a separate card for create navigation bar prefab that we can basically use like generally. Use navigation bar prefab when ready. So we can have a consistent, top bar on all of the screens that need something like that. Cool. All right, so other things I'm working on. Let's see what time it is here. Yeah, so I have about another half an hour. So I've been working on getting Android phone builds working. There's some updates to things. You need to support 64-bit on Google Play now. Those are not super exciting to watch Unity build, so that's basically in progress right now. But I'm also working on some other things in the game view, and there was one item I thought might be useful to, or potentially straightforward to do, relatively straightforward to do on the dev stream. So let's see if it is, and we'll see how we do. So what I want to do is get my debug settings. Yeah, so let's get, I have a 2 hero setup here, and the thing I want to do is specific to 2 heroes. So let's go ahead, and we're in the Dragon's Cave. See, we've been making some improvements on how things are working in the UI since last week even. All right, we're going to get to an encounter. Ooh, all right. Fire Elemental. All right, so we're going to go into this. You can see our heroes are we've got more room for skills since last time, and you can see your items better. Those have all been improved, as well as the pop-ups, so lots of little improvements. One thing we're looking at doing, we haven't finalized these icons, is whenever you've gone away from the main page, the icon for the main area will change to remind you, you're looking at a door right now, right? Or you're in a peril, or you're in a combat, or whatever it is. And so that's something that I think is kind of neat. Actually, just an idea I had, we could make this be the image of if you're fighting a monster, it could be that monster's image. That could be interesting. I'm not sure if that would work or not, but something to try. So we're gonna go into this and see what happens. Oh, the screen went gray. What's that all about? Why is the screen gray? There's nothing to do. Well, what's happening is the game is asking, if you're familiar with the game, it's asking a question about which hero should do the thing. So this encounter says, before the encounter, one hero loses health or takes damage. And that is happening here because, note that heroic feat die is not really going in the right place. We'll fix that too. Those are getting put onto the hero panels, and that looks fine in landscape. Let's show you what it looks like in landscape just to make it clear. So if I go to UI landscape and I open that scene, my debug settings I just set to continue the game, so it should pop up at the same place, because as you've seen, everything on the low level is all the same. So you can see it popped up, and you know, it's like a little speech bubble almost, right? Like, but sort of One Deck Dungeon themed, and that's what the same thing it's doing in Portrait. It's just those elements are not on the screen, right? So we need to do something different. So what I'm going to do is get back to my game view portrait, and I will tell you about my idea. So let's run this again. So what I'd like to do is avoid taking you away from the screen if we can. So not have you have to click over to another screen to answer a decision, but be able to focus on doing it right away. So we already have our little hero images right here. So my initial idea basically is to have, instead of, we could have like sort of a pop-up with like a decision, but we can still use those speech bubble ideas, but just have them come from down here instead of from over there. And so if we look at what's generating those buttons, you might be able to click through on them here. Let me click on them, maybe. And Unity isn't always good at figuring out what you're clicking on. Yeah, it's this select hero button is right here. So you can see that is right there. And so that select hero button, let's see where that lives when we're not actually running it. It's actually always there, which is interesting. So we could potentially just have this be over in the right spot, which might be sort of the easiest, quick way to do it. So let's see if that works. I don't know if it's going to work, but we can try it. Because these hero pinners are not necessarily in the same place every time. So yeah, so hero 1 is here. And yeah, let's try just moving the button. Let's move it over here to where hero 1 is. And for hero 2, let's move that button. Let's move it, over here. Maybe move it here, and maybe have hero 1's button be like up a little higher. Could work. We'd need to change what the button looks like. Maybe like have this like pop down or something like that. Let's see what happens. All right, so we get one button in the right place, but the other button is over here. And that's because of how this paging is working. If we like go to the scene and zoom out, you can see that first hero's button is still in the right place relative to where the panel is, but at the very start of, like in the pre-game setup, it's not in the right place. Because in the pre-game, in the scene, they're actually in the same spot instead of being shifted over. Now that could potentially, so a couple things we could do. We could move this button to actually live in a different place and not live where the hero is, and that could work. What I'm thinking though is actually maybe these panels should be not in the same spot to begin with. because they'll probably move to where they need to be. So let's see, if we move hero 1 actually to start out further off, we'll see what happens. So here we actually want we want X to start at -1, -1. So we're actually going to start the scene here. What we do if there's no hero 2, we like take that hero 2 out, and it should make everything go correctly. So let's see if this, and let's just add this another 540, which is our page width over. This is a little weird, but maybe it will do the trick. All right, so now actually our things are in the right place. What I do want to double check though is, do things still work properly if it's one hero? Because maybe what I did there is going to screw it up, and when we might, doesn't mean we can't deal with it, but we need to see what happens. All right, so far so good. Yep, hero 1 is still in the right spot. So what the control we use to do the paging sort of tucks everything in automatically, and so it overrides. And see, hero 2 panel is actually like just off, doing nothing. We should probably destroy it, but this just overrides the transform and puts it in the right place so that it's all paged. So that looks like it's actually working fine. We don't use that select hero button if there's only one player, so it that's going to be off on this other page in one player, but we never use it. I don't think it's only for deciding between two heroes. So I think the way we're going to do it here is okay. Change this to Paladin. I think that's going to be fine. We could, I mean, if it ends up being an issue, we can always take this button and actually make it live on the bottom bar, or something like that. But I think the way we've got it here is going to be okay. So let's work with that. And if we need to make some adjustments later, we'll do that. But I feel okay about this. So let's just try to make it look a little more reasonable first here. So let's go into an encounter. So we probably won't get a flame elemental, but we still, since we're starting this at a higher level, we're going to have questions about the dice. So we're still going to get those questions. We also, another thing that I want to be looking into is heroic feat, but that's similar. We want that to pop up on this screen. Yeah, so here, so let's stop here and continue the game from here. Then we can just pop back in. Make sure I don't forget to do that. We have to go through all the rest. Yeah, so this is something that probably will have Jennifer come up with a solution, but basically we want to have an indicator that it's going to be this hero rolling or this hero rolling or taking damage or whatever, whatever the thing is. So, we could potentially do something like rotate them so that they come in like this. Like that could work. I don't know if it's good. Like this, and then the other one could be, like this, but not like as much. It looks a little funny, right? We need to, I think, have a different image there, so that, that's yeah, I don't like necessarily having text on an angle like that, but potentially having just a a connector that looks a little different could work. I don't necessarily hate this, but I don't love it either. So I think we'll figure out something that is going to work a little better, because I want to have text be. It's a lot more readable to have text go across as opposed to go diagonally or sideways. So you want to avoid that if you can. Yeah, I think just generally making these a little smaller, or whether smaller or just more, a little more vertically narrow is going to be better, potentially. I mean, you still want to have good touch targets. Actually, potentially having them side by side could work, but then, you know, I like this text that's like, I'll do this thing. I don't know if we want to do that. We could say, like, you know, archer rolls and then paladin rolls could be a way to do it as well. So that's some things to think about. Yeah, you can see we can click on them and they'll work. We'll actually have another one because of we're at the next level. So I think that's something we're going to need to basically think a bit more about. How will we fit these buttons, you know, in and still make sense? You know, having them, you know, suppose it doesn't have that little whatchamacallit. I think we might have we have other buttons that don't have the little speech bubble thing. Sort of having them side by side could work. The problem is, like, you know, you want it to indicate that hero and they're all over there. I mean, we really like how those are set up, sort of to mirror how the pages are set up. So yeah, I think that's something we'll probably do a couple mock-up ideas of, and see what works. I think, you know, potentially right now at least we're getting to the idea where, like, it's functional. So that's the first step, and then you know, you're not having to go over to the other screen to make that decision. You can still go and look at the other screen and make your decision. One of the nice things, if we did anchor them over to, one thing I was thinking, if we anchor it to the bottom here, then they stay on the screen instead of going away, and that might be even better. So I might change my mind on that. So if we take this button and so this is actually referring to the button, but we can say maybe this button is going to not live there. It's going to live on the toolbar. And that is actually has a layout group, which is going to screw up my button. We can add a layout element to ignore that. But if this is here, and let's say this is select hero 1 button, and the other one, where's hero 2 panel? Yeah, breaking prefabs, but that's okay. We'll add a layout element. Yeah, taking it out of the hero means it's not part of the prefab, but I think that's okay. I definitely like the idea of having them stay on the screen when you scroll, because it's like an important decision, right? That you want to review and then maybe make your decision at that point. So here I move them there, so now they're actually living on this part, which doesn't scroll. I definitely like that more, because then you can go like, what dice do I have here? Who should be rolling this, right? So I can say like, oh yeah, let's make the archer roll it, and then we get it back, right? So that's definitely feels better. And so I think I'm going to go with that idea. And then the thing is, basically, yeah, so I might not break the prefab here. Let's see what time it is. I might have to go. Oh, I have some time. Okay. So what I want to do is probably not break that prefab, but like have those buttons over there. And, like, I want to still be able to work with prefabs as they are, right? I guess I could probably still apply the prefab and it should work. We can try that. But yeah, having these buttons live on the toolbar is definitely better, so that you can still go and look at stuff about your heroes and make a decision based on that. And then we'll try to set these up so that they don't necessarily block a lot of the screen, but they give you that functionality. So that's definitely a solution to that problem. that is fairly good. So if I just apply this prefab, is it gonna still, it still says it's broken, but sometimes Unity does that and it's not really broken. I think that's okay. Yeah, we're getting all these red icons. Let's see if I reopen it. Sometimes it clears those up. Yeah, now it's like, I'm fine, everything's blue. And we should still be working. Hi, Snakebird Priestess. I love this game too. And we're excited to get it onto your phone soon. Cool, so yeah, so here, yeah, we still got our scrolly thing working like we like, and I should be able to click on this, and the die goes to the right hero and all that, so that's cool. So yeah, I think that is definitely a better solution. We still, you can see that these go, the dice go over top of them, but maybe that's okay. Basically, we just need to probably figure out like, how are these buttons going to work? You know, maybe we do, you know, we still can use these in, you know, have these arranged in a way that, you know, maybe they're just like in the middle of the screen more, and they say something like, you know, like instead of I'll roll this, they say like Archer rolls heroic, and, you know, we make them a little bigger or something like that to, like, you know, make it more like a sort of pop-up thing, because, you know, just the limitations of how that is might be a better way to go, but I think we'll need to do a little bit of playing around with that. Yeah, if we do like this, you know, maybe that, if you look back in the game view, maybe that's a better way to do it. I still like to have it connected to these somehow, but you know, obviously having it pop up on a, we probably want it to be those to be a little lower if they're that big, so that they don't block the challenge boxes and stuff like that. So those are things we need to consider too, right? So, you know, maybe these are at 250 or 260 and 150 or whatever. So, you know, you're not necessarily covering important information, and you can make your decision and still look around at what you've got. You know, so those are things that we'll want to consider as part of this. But I think the basic setup is functional, playable, and we'll just work on iterating on how that looks. So I'm pretty happy with that direction at the moment. So I'm going to go ahead and save this stuff. My hard drive is almost full. I don't know if that's true. It says I have 100 gigs free, so I disagree. So here we basically move select hero buttons to the toolbar, and it's still work in progress. All right, so that is definitely some notable progress on this issue, interaction of showing those hero selection pop-ups. It's not finished, but it is improved. Similarly is going to be the heroic feat element. I'm not going to get into fixing that, but I'll talk about some ideas as well as the skills. So I have a few minutes. I can talk about some ideas of where we're going to go with those interactions. Those are pretty important. Those are pretty core interactions to playing the game. So let's uncheck this, and yeah, Archer has a heroic feat that will pop up at the start, and we may as well pick Rogue, who's going to have a heroic feat that pops up as well. Let's get into a encounter again. So we already passed that spot, I believe. skeleton. So let's enter. Yeah, so, similarly to the other thing, we just get this button that says skip heroic feat, and then nothing else. And then, you can scroll over or click over and see, oh, I can press on them to use their heroic feat. But similarly to that decision pop-up, we want to have this stuff happen on the main screen. So what's going to happen there, and that's going to be a little more involved because these heroic feat buttons, they need to live here because that's where we want them to sort of naturally be. And they are here in the heroic feat view here. So, potentially, just be like, oh, maybe make this live over there. And then it will just be on the screen when it needs to be. But it's not even on the screen because it's behind something else. That's not really a good solution because we want it to be over here, right? We want you to be able to still scroll back and look at the whole context of your hero and not have it be gone from there. And so what we'll likely want to do is, have some sort of button-based version of this or something that you can actually click on. I'll go back and continue the game here. On the main screen, so you can quickly use your heroic feat right there, and not have to go over to the other screen. But if you want, you can still go over to the other screen, look at how many dice do I have, what are my skills, look at the challenge boxes, take all that information into account by making your decision, but still be able to quickly, maybe one of them is going to be here, or maybe up at the top where that hero's dice pool is, their heroic feat would be up there. That would make a lot of sense, I think. And the other heroes, potentially down here. So there's different ways we can look at that, but basically have that information be at your fingertips at that point. And then, if you don't want to use the heroic feats, you can skip them. And so I'm going to go into the encounter here. And so that's a heroic feat. That's something that's an important step that we're going to get that interaction polished up for phone. And then another big thing is skills. So, a big part of One Deck Dungeon is rolling your dice and putting them in boxes. But oh, that's supposed to stop. That's not working right. I must have broken that. When you're dragging dice, it's supposed to not scroll the thing, but I must have broken that. Or maybe it's not working in two heroes. That's possible. Anyways, whenever you're in the encounter, you want to both be putting stuff on challenge boxes, but you also want to use your skills. And a lot of skills will require you to, pay a cost, whether it's pay a die or magic dice or things like that. You do, of course, have your free skills that you can just click on. Those are still going to be the same way, basically. Right? You can just it'll be highlighted. These ones don't happen to have one you can highlight in this battle, I guess. Yeah, because their die is 6. It can't be increased, but that would be just highlighted, and you can increase that die by 1. It would sort of pop over to select the die, so that would work very similarly to the regular mode, landscape mode. But for the ones where you pay a skill, you can see it's kind of awkward to drag a die. I mean, despite this not going right, drag a die over to the other screen somehow. Why is that not working right? That's making this really annoying to talk about. But drag a die to the other screen and drop it on a skill. What if you change your mind? You need to drag it back, or where does it go? That's really messy. We might still allow that sort of interaction, but the primary way we're looking at for skill interaction is going to be, these are going to be available to click on. So you can tap on this, and then it will be like, okay, choose the, now that you're activating Crushing Blow, which strength die do you want to use with it? So then you'd be like, I'm gonna, probably you would say, in this case, you'd be the archer, I want to click on Cleave. It'll bring you back to this screen where you can then click which die you want to pay for it, and then you go through the normal cleave flow. So that's the kind of thing that we're looking at for skill interactions. And another nice thing is that interaction would also become available on the landscape one. It's something we had planned to add, but it didn't become into scope, is being able to do that. And so that's a a feature that will cross over to the Steam and tablet version as well. You'll be able to use your skills that way if you don't want to drag and drop the dice. So that's something that's nice for that. We'll definitely look into other things, like maybe if you start dragging a strength die, it'll like maybe pop up like, hey, there's a skill you could use with this or something like that. There could definitely be little things we could do to make it a little more discoverable in terms of how to use skills. Because you definitely, like, when you're on the screen, especially if you're a new player, you might not even think about your skills because they're not on the screen, right? That's something that's definitely a factor. It's just there's enough on the screen that we don't have room for them, but potentially we can have it help you out by being like, hey, you could use your skill here. You should think about that. So yeah, those are some of the things that we're continuing to work on the phone version, but it's coming along really nicely. So that's probably going to be it for the stream today. I've got some other stuff to get to, but if there's any quick questions before the end, I can answer them. And maybe I'll look and see why that... While I'm waiting for questions, I want to figure out why that... oh, you know what? I wonder if these dice boxes... Yeah. These are supposed to be... Aren't these supposed to be? No, that's not happening there. I bet there's... I changed some code in here about the allowing scrolling, and that's fine. Yeah, it's supposed to... Let's see if these logs are showing up. It's possible that my code that was stopping the scrolling, I'm not sure if I did this on the stream, maybe not, is not getting hooked up right. But looks like we might not have any questions, so I will wrap up this piece and then sign off. Or maybe sign off without wrapping it up, we'll see. Could be a little tricky. Oh yeah, so I am getting those calls, but I'm not getting... It is actually moving, but something's going wrong with the logic of how much it's moving, I think. So I think that's what's going on. So I need to look into that. Yeah, no, something's funny there. I'll need to look into that. Just like me sitting here thinking at the screen isn't going to help anything. So that's going to be it for the stream. So thanks again for watching, and we'll see you next time. It's been fun having dev streams. Talk to you later.